You can get the other mic on that side.
I was just wondering if I could get an example of an addiction and how it's, like, what like you said it can affect all principles.
Yep.
Like, yeah, just wondering if there's like an example of an addiction and what principles it's.
Right, let's look at your addiction with women with sex. Right, okay. So, what's the addiction? Can you feel that you understand your own addiction?
Partly.
Okay, so
like
what
a
do you understand?
desperation for
Sexual attention and approval.
Good feelings from women.
Yeah, okay, so that's the addiction, and you're desperate for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll, yeah, go.
So-
Well, you're willing to do a lot of things to get that, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're willing to disregard a lot of law,
Yeah. So
human and
Yeah.
okay, so let's look at the laws you're willing to disregard, the principles you're willing to disregard. So when you've got the opportunity to tell the truth, but you know the truth will result in a woman feeling that you're, not a nice guy, what do?
Don't say anything.
Don't say anything. So that's not transparency, so you've broken the law of truth, the principle of truth.
Yep.
Okay, so there's got to be lots of laws you're breaking there, because almost every law of the universe is based on truth. So lots of laws, right, broken there.
Yep.
Okay, what else do? You try to force your sort of self on it, don't you?
Yep.
Like force them. How do you do that? Like there's a number of methods you use. What are the methods? Want some help with it?
One is putting myself in a situation where, like, a woman is with me.
Yeah.
Like, where she might not have wanted to,
Yeah, so you try to force yourself upon her, even though you know she's not really interested.
like with money for like paying for in the past things I've done, and
So what have you done there?
like going for massages and something I'm still engaged in. It's like in a situation that should be just very down the line, nothing sexual stuff going on, but
Yeah.
I'm willing to have those feelings happening in that situation.
Yeah, so you're trying to create a circumstance where you do get sexual feelings from somebody.
Yeah.
and you almost impose your sexual feelings
Yeah.
onto the person who's just trying to give you a massage.
Yes.
Yeah. So what laws do you break there? Do you know?
Free will.
Okay, so you're breaking their free will, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because you're not really giving them a choice. You're trying to force them into a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. To give you sexual feelings.
Yeah.
Whether that's sexual feelings or actual sexual behaviour.
Yeah.
You're trying to force that. Yes.
Yeah.
What else? So free will, big issue.
Yeah.
And free will is about love, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's one of God's most loving gifts that He gave all of His children. Yeah. So it's breaking the principle of love.
Yeah.
How are you breaking other principles of love? What are other principles of love, such as? What's
not
love?
feeling what's coming up for me. Like just avoiding my own.
So you're not being humble, you're
Yeah.
engaging in something else to try
Yeah,
and avoid.
yeah,
that's more to do with humility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about if we go back to love?
Let's stay on love for a bit. What is love? Is love a gift or a
Entitlement.
entitlement?
Gifts.
A gift. So every time you feel entitled for something, you're not understanding love at all.
Yeah.
Right? So in this case, you're feeling entitled for sexual engagement.
Yep.
So you're not giving the woman the opportunity to love you at all.
Yeah.
Right? And you're certainly not loving them because you feel entitled.
Yeah.
If they did give you something under those circumstances, you would have felt entitled to it anyway.
Mm.
So you wouldn't even see it as a gift.
Yeah.
Right? So breaking some very big principles of love there.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
But, so let's go to humility like you did before.
Yep.
So you not wanting to feel some, what do you feel when you don't get sexual feelings from a woman?
Just
Like gutted, right?
almost like I just can't cope with life. It's
Yeah, like you feel angry. Angry is
Yeah.
the very first feeling you have, isn't it?
Mm.
So almost suicidal angry.
I've been I've always felt I'm not suicidal, but I'm wondering how, if I keep going in this way,
Yep.
yeah, like that could be, I don't know.
And also, you could easily get violent with a woman too under those circumstances, couldn't you? So not good in that regard. So what's that? Not being humble to what feelings? In other words, not being prepared to feel your feelings no matter what they are and however hard they are to feel. So what are the feelings that are hard to feel when you're in this state where you're demanding sexual activity and you don't get any? What are the feelings that are hard to feel? Can you recognise them?
Kind of like a self-disgust type.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
Pretty deep. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you're quite worried about going to the feelings, which is why you're often reverting to anger to try and feel powerful over them.
Yeah. So can you see the difficulty there is not being prepared to feel how bad you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So you feel bad about yourself and you're looking for women to make you feel better about yourself. Right? Because you don't want to go through the feelings you have about how bad you feel about yourself.
Yep.
Make sense? So that is an aspect of humility, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Being prepared to feel how bad you feel about yourself. It's also an aspect of truth. Fundamentally seeing that it's not how the women feel about you that matters. What's mattering here is how you feel about you. You feel bad about you for some reason that you haven't really at this stage identified because you haven't let yourself feel it yet. That makes sense? You're doing everything you can to avoid the feeling, and that's why you haven't identified the reason for the feeling. But
I can't sit in it long enough. That just seems to what happened. I just need the distraction.
yeah, see what you just did? And this is a common thing. You said, I can't and I need. I can't is really saying, this is not me. This is something out of my control. It's out of my, when I say I can't do it, I can't stay there. I can't, get it. I can't understand it. This is saying to yourself, and these are actually false beliefs, right? That you're saying to yourself, because you can. God designed you to. God designed your soul to cope with any emotion. You can do it. You can feel these feelings, and you can handle them. Right? There's so many people in the spirit world that I know who started out with the same feelings you now have, and they all handled them. Every one of them handled them, and they felt bad, but they handled them. Right? Because God designed them to handle them. Because God designed the soul that you can handle your own feelings. Right? So whenever you say, I can't, you're fundamentally breaking another principle which says God designed you to. You're the highest of God's creations. You can handle your feelings. You're the highest of God's creations. In fact, you're the only one of God's creations that God designed to have feelings in terms of emotions that that the person themselves understand. In other words, self-realized emotions. God designed you so that you have them.
So that's another principle, this principle of self-responsibility. God is drawing you towards this state of self-responsibility, and at the moment you're breaking that principle. You're saying, I can't, it's not my responsibility.
Now, just for a moment, let's say that we just listed 4 principles, right, in this discussion with you. Just 4. Let's say Jada actually loved those principles. So at the moment, Jada's going, those principles don't matter as much as my emotions do. In other words, emotions, principles. That's what you're saying internally.
Yeah.
Now, while your emotions are that high and the principles are this low, when you're faced with a situation, what's going to happen? Your
emotions say.
Yeah, you're going to do exactly what your emotions demand, aren't you?
Yeah.
And you're not going to feel them, but you're just going to do exactly what they demand. And principles be damned is going to be the attitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
the emotional attitude inside of oneself would be, who cares about the principles? My emotions are involved. I'll do the principles when my emotions are not involved. But if my emotions are involved, now it's too hard to do the principles anymore. That's the fundamental decision that's being made. So while I'm making that decision that my emotions are more important than the principles, I'm going to sin, guaranteed. There is no way that I can't sin under those circumstances, because the principles don't matter to me and the emotions do. And whatever unhealed emotions I have and whatever painful emotions I feel, they are going to dominate my choices. They're going to dominate my decisions, my actions, everything. Yeah? So here I am. I've got my emotions are in play, and I'm saying those emotions, I've got to save them. In fact, what I'm really saying is I've got to leave them inside of me. I've got to nurture them and save them. I've got to, nurse them, is really what I'm saying. I've got to nurse them, and that's more important to me than any principle. Now, can you see that if your emotions are that intense, the only way that anything's going to change in your life is for the principles to get even more intense? Can you see that? Yep. If your emotions are very strong and very powerful on a certain matter, which by the way on most of our addictions they are, the only way that I'm going to make sure that those emotions are felt is by the principles being even stronger. Because if my principles are not stronger than the emotion, then I'm just going to do what the emotion dictates. If the principles are stronger than the emotion, then I'll do what the principle dictates.
And start to feel
and
those
just feel my
emotions.
emotions.
So the emotional intensity will dissipate. So even if you just love one principle, Jad, really love it, grow this interest in it, grow this love in it, it's going to highlight to you the sin. And if you honour the principle instead of your addiction, you will start to feel the emotions that are driving the addiction, which lowers the intensity of the addiction. It helps you grow more interest in the other principles as well. It's like it's a process that supports you once you start to engage it. It supports you continued growth. But when we're fighting for the addiction, sort of like what we were saying with Nikki, when we're really honouring it and honouring the emotion, the principles don't even have a chance. We can't start the love affair with the principle, if you like. But once we do, this process becomes, you start to grow in the other way.
So I think there's something more than Mary just said, though. And that is, how do you love anything? What do you do to sort of fall in love with the thing?
Learn about it, get to know it.
You get to know it, you spend time with it, you learn about it. So let's say I want to love Mary, and my desire is to love Mary, and let's say at the beginning I don't really know her well, I don't really, so to know her, I would find out about her, find out about how she feels and how she thinks and what principles she lives by and what her personality is and what her nature is, and I'd find all that information out with her. So let's treat truth, let's say we want to develop a love affair with truth, right? Because really, this is what it means to have the principle in my heart, is to love it with my whole heart. And so really sort of have a love affair with that principle. Does that make sense to you? So how do I develop a love affair with a principle? Well, obviously I've got to learn more about it. I've got to understand it more, study it more.
It's like, it feels like building a friendship first, before it can become a love affair. At the moment you're like enemies, I don't want to know about you.
But also if you look at day-to-day activities and day-to-day life, how much time do you spend understanding the principle?
Seeking that out.
Like developing an interest in the principle, discovering what it means, what does it mean, what are the aspects of that principle, what how would that principle play out in your life if you really loved it? You'd study it, you see what I'm saying? And you'd come to understand it better. But at some point you're going to also need some faith in it as well, right? As to why does it work? Well, why does truth work? Like in a relationship, why does truth work? Well, when one person lies and the other person is the recipient of the lie, then there's no longer really a relationship anymore. That's why truth in a relationship works better than lies in a relationship, right? But there's many other reasons why. So study the reasons. Like learn about them, spend some time. But see, for most of us on earth, we spend most of our time sort of eking out an existence, pleasing ourselves or others, and we spend very little time coming to understand a principle. We don't study them. You imagine if school life began 5 years of age, and the very first principle taught was year 5, what's that, grade 1, love. We have a year learning about love. The principle of love, like all the aspects of love, what it means to love people. And imagine by the time you were 6, you might, by that stage, really enjoy love, mightn't you? Yeah. Right? But if you don't understand it, and you don't understand how it works and the laws that govern how it flows and all those kind of things, which are all established fact in God's universe, but which most people on earth are never taught. If you don't understand those things, can you see, you can grow up to be 50 and still not understand love at all. You know, what's that song? How did it song go? Still don't understand love at all.
Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell, yeah.
Both
sides now, from give and take, but still somehow. You know, why is a person who, well, I don't know what age she was when she was singing that song, and whoever wrote it for her, she might have written it herself, I don't know, but, and why are they even thinking that way? It's because they've never been educated in love their entire life. But it's also because the average person doesn't spend any time educating themselves. They just don't.
Seeking it out.
They don't seek an education in the principles. They seek an education like materially. They seek an education like with engineering or with science or arts or whatever, but they don't seek an education with principles. But the biggest thing in the universe is the principle. Right? So that's the thing that we should all be seeking an education of first. Right? But hardly anybody on earth thinks that way. And nobody in the education system obviously thinks that way because there's no education provided with regard to these principles, right? You need to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
You need to start providing for yourself your own education of what that principle means. You follow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you do that...
Why I asked the question, you were saying addictions affecting all the principles, and I'm thinking... I still know them, but not really. Yeah, I was really struggling to make the connection of what am I really breaking?
Yeah, like this is the thing we find. We've been talking to groups of people now for like 2004 I started talking to groups of people. 20 years, isn't it? About these principles, right? What I find generally is that the average person spends no time in their life studying them. At all. They already presume they know them without spending any time studying them. So when they hear the term love, everybody thinks they know what you're talking about. But we have spent no time understanding it. So how do we actually know it? Right? It's the same with the principle of truth. But when we say truth, the average person goes, oh, I get what truth is. But if you've spent no time understanding all of its sub-aspects and all of its the principles associated with it, how do you know? Can you see? The trouble with the education we have on earth is we get usually a dictionary by the time we're 6 or 7 right at school, and somebody says, look up the word truth, this is what it means, they're done. Right? But like as I said, you could study truth for a year and not know much about it. Right, really. and particularly study it from an emotional perspective in terms of where you study it and try to put that particular thing into practice. So what I'm saying as part of the study is that you study an aspect of truth, and then the very next day, you from then on do that thing and see what happens. So now you're not just studying it, but you're now applying it. It's like having an engineering degree, but you're also doing the engineering while you had the degree. You understand? It's like having a teaching degree, but you're actually teaching while you're doing your degree. So when you learn about truth, for example, well, every time you learn a new aspect of truth, the next day you make some positive decisions in your life to live in harmony with that very thing and just see what happens. What things occur, right? You'll find in some places you might even start measuring and go, wow, there's these positive things that happen because I did that. And then other situations where people don't like you saying the truth, you go, wow, that was pretty negative. Like, wow, why did that happen? Like, they were so angry with me before. They were happy with me lying to them. And now that I'm telling them the truth, they're not happy with me anymore. That's what the average politician feels, right? And so you start working out, people don't like truth as much as they think they do either. And you start working that out as well. You learn more about human nature as well as about the principle. In terms of, and when I say human nature, human sin, as you learn about the principle. The beauty of doing this is you're educating yourself. By the way, God feels you are responsible to educate yourself. Right? That's what it means to be self-responsible, to educate yourself. So you're educating yourself about a principle, then you're acting upon your own education and performing experiments. Doesn't this sound more like a uni degree now, doesn't it? Which is really what it is, isn't it? But a university degree in what love is, or a university degree in what truth is, right? So what you do is you learn about the principle. That's, you could say, the theory. And then what you do is you create some experiments. That's your practicals, right? And then you measure the results of the experiments to work out what happened, right? And that develops your faith.
And through the experiments, you come to feel what the principle feels like. Not you feel what truth feels like. Feel, and you come. And
also feel how hard it is to do it in an environment where nobody else wants to.
Yeah, but it's no longer an idea. Now there's an experience attached, and if you're humble in that process, you also start to learn more about the principle without even having to seek outside of yourself. You're like, this is leading me to a new experiment. This truthfulness. Am I really truthful if I just say the truth, but I'm not feeling it? You know, that doesn't feel like truth, you know. But that will come to you through this engagement of the experiment.
Yeah. So if you treat if the principles are important to you, you will investigate them, plan your life around developing them. You'll create experiments to try them out. You'll do all of that as a natural part of the process of learning, right? As long as you desire to understand the principle. But if you don't want to understand it at all, then of course you're not going to do any of those things. And really, you could say doing all of those things is an expression of your sincerity about your interest in the principle. Can you see, if I'm not sincere about understanding the principle, I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm just going to walk my way through life, listening to terms and using the terminology, whatever, with my mouth, but at the end of the day, none of it is affecting my life at all because I have not developed a desire to really love and come to understand and get to know the principle. So that's what I would suggest you do, Jack. Yeah. So with regard to this, see what you're doing at the moment is you're focusing on one particular sin, the treatment of women. You could say the particular sins involving the treatment of women, but you're not focusing on the principles. All right? Overseas, we had a discussion, I think it was with Perry, wasn't it? in the first group in England, it was in Linton.
On the second day.
Yeah, but he started telling me about his same problem, the problem he had with how he treats women. And I constantly said to him, I don't want to hear about that problem, I want to hear about the principles. But what, and eventually we got down to having a discussion about some of the principles involved and what it means to focus on the principle rather than the problem. You follow?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're focusing on the problem without seeing the problem is based upon the fact that you're breaking principles.
Mm.
So if you focused on the principles, then you'd solve many problems, right?
Is the problem not causing me to also not live by the principle?
No. And this is what I was saying to Perry. He was saying to me, the reason why I don't want to know the principles is because of this problem. I go, no, that's not true at all. A person can have many, many problems, but have a desire for a principle and overcome every problem. But if you try to do the opposite, you'll never resolve anything. Right? So yes, this whole concept that people say, oh, they use the excuse, which is the one that you just used, which is, but I have this problem and that stops me from living by the principles. No, it doesn't. What stops you from living by the principles is the problem is bigger than the principle. Do you understand? You're putting your addiction above the principle.
Yeah.
The principle should be up here, and you're putting your addiction up here, and the principle down here.
Yeah.
That's why you're dominated by the addiction. You understand? If the principle was here, up high, and your addiction was down here, low, then you could see you wouldn't allow the addiction to dominate the principle. The principle would dominate the addiction. In other words, instead of acting upon your addiction, you would choose to feel rather than act upon your addiction. In other words, you choose to get to that grief that you just had before rather than act upon the addiction to avoid it. If you loved the principle. So the problem isn't the problems you face. The problem is the lack of love for the principles. Yeah?
Yeah.
You're kind of engrossed in the problem rather than interested and becoming engrossed in the principle.
Yeah. That's not like this.
You might be having to.
Yeah, so as we were talking about with Jad just earlier, can you see the importance of the principle over the addiction? Like, I think when you look at it, studying the principle and understanding the principle and really spending some time, firstly coming to understand it yourself, and then secondly trying or attempting to put the principle into practice in your day-to-day life, what you will find as a guarantee is that emotions will come up and you just need to feel them. And that will happen very, very naturally. You don't have to make that happen. So a lot of people have the focus of, I just need to feel my emotion and then I'll live by the principle. No, you won't. What you need to do is have the principle as a higher priority in your life than the emotion, and then you'll feel whatever emotions you need to feel to uphold the principle.
And you'll actually feel the emotions that you need to let go of in order to uphold the principle, because a lot of times when you focus on your emotion, you just feel your tantrum, you just feel it's not fair, you feel it's hard, you feel you're being hard done, whatever is preferable for you to feel.
Yeah.
And you're not really measuring your feelings against God's truth. The principle automatically creates that differential where you can measure that difference.
Yeah.
Matt?
I just wanted to ask